So, you want to know what mythological heroes would most likely be the four cardinal heroes based on the weapons they most famously wielded? Alright, for the Shield Hero Comparative Mythology deep dive, because here we go. King Arthur is probably the most famous sword-wielding hero in fiction from a Eurocentric lens. However, did you know that before he wielded Excalibur, he also used a spear named Roigamont? It appears in Thomas Mallory's work as the weapon he used to slay Mordred at Camlan. Arthur also had the shield Prydwen, that is sometimes called his ship, so in actuality Arthur had at least 3 of the 4 cardinal weapons. Not only that, but in the 11th century Welsh lore, the story of Colich and Olwen, Arthur was also gifted a dagger by God that could shroud the user in shadows. The name of this dagger was Carnwenon, Little White Hilt. It becomes his pivotal weapon against the witch Ordu within the story. Ultimately, he's used several arms and armor to pull him out of the rankings of being one of the legendary cardinal heroes like those found in Rising of the Shield Hero. But what about Sigurd? Sigurd is from Norse mythology and wields a sword named Gram to slay the dragon Fafnir. What's notable about Sigurd is he only ever wields swords within the mythology. He has a sword named Gram that he forged with the help of Regan, a master smith, and Sigurd's foster father. Sigurd inherited the sword from his father Sigmund as a shattered relic after Sigmund's last battle. Reforging Gram was an arduous task that split Regan's anvil in a single hammer strike. The sword was so sharp that when Sigurd dropped a bit of wool against the edge, the wool split effortlessly. Also, prior to reforging Gram, Sigurd used a sword named Riddle, which also belonged to Regan. After Sigurd slew Fafnir, Riddle was used to cut out his heart so that Sigurd could consume it, gaining the wisdom of the birds and the treasure-hoarding ring that Fafnir used to amass his immense wealth. It's also noted that Sigurd stole the sword Hrotti from Fafnir prior to fighting him. Now, knights slaying dragons with swords is a tale as old as time. It's also important to remember where those stories inevitably come from. King Arthur never slew any dragons. Lancelot, Tristan, and Yvain did. But then Sigurd's story is built around this feat. And, in Rising of the Shield Hero, it's the sword hero Ren who slew the dragon Galleon and caused a cursed plague to befall the village of Myrso. Similarly, Sigurd takes the heart and blood of Fafnir but leaves the rest of his body to the elements. It doesn't cause any villages to be cursed or plagued. Instead, Sigurd himself falls victim to the deadly curse attached to Fafnir's ring. Fergus MacRoich is a character from Ulster mythology. He's known for his sword, Caladabog, Hard Blade, a magical weapon that is something like a great sword. It had the destructive property of being able to slice the tops off of mountains in a single strike, and its blade apparently glittered with a rainbow of colors every time it was swung. He's not known to have any other weapons except for a wooden substitute, so I'd say he's also another hard and solid choice for our cardinal hero of the sword. Perseus from Greek mythology used Harput to slay Medusa. While it's known that Perseus had many tools and magical armors at his disposal, including Medusa's head, first of all, using monster parts as an offensive measure is characteristic of the cardinal heroes, and there's nothing that stops him from using outside tools and magical powers. Yamato Takeru famously wielded the Kusanagi no Tsurugi given to him by his aunt, the wind goddess Yamato Hime. This sword was originally found inside the body of Yamato no Orochi, the 8-headed serpent. The sword gave Takeru the power of the wind, and he used it effectively in battle. He's not known to have any other weapons beside a wooden replica like Fergus did. For spear heroes, I can think of no one better than Cuchulainn. Cuchulainn is from Ulster mythology, so not only does he go in line with Fergus, Fergus and Cuchulainn actually meet, and Fergus is his foster father. However, there is a problem with Cuchulainn in this role. Cuchulainn's most famous weapon is the spear Gae Bolg, a weapon that always finished every opponent with certainty. However, in his youth, Cuchulainn also used a projectile spear in his very first battle. He also used slings and a magical sword called a Cruadine Catucan. Not to mention the famous tale at the end of Cuchulainn's life, In order to mentally torture an army while slipping from the mortal coil, Cuchulainn ties his shield Duban to his arm and his body to a rock to remain standing until the goddess Morrigan, disguised as a crow, landed on his shoulder to signal his demise. So, as much as I'd like for him to be Cuchulainn, he isn't our spear hero. Who else could we pick? Izanagi from Japanese mythology? Shiva? Lu? Possibly Odin? Well, Lord Shiva is right out. He has far too many weapons and tools to name, all giving him divine powers around creation, time, life, death, so no. Lu, the Tuatha De Danann of light and ingenuity, primarily wields a spear, Ge Asal, which gives him the power of fire. But, in order to defeat his Fomorian grandfather Baelor, Lu doesn't use his spear. He uses a sling stone to knock out his eye. Lu also used the sword Fragarak, a sword named the Answer. Oh, I get chills. Come on. Time out. You've got to admit, that's pretty cool. Especially if you think about the terms of, like, how Fae can't be hurt by weapons they know the names of. Imagine the Fomorians asking Lu, "What weapon is that?" And Lu says back, This isn't a weapon. It's my answer." Izanagi famously used the divine spear Ame no Nohoko, along with his sister, to stir the chaotic seas of the ancient world and create the first islands of Japan. However, after his sister Izanami perished from burns she suffered giving birth to the fire god Kagutsuchi, Izanagi flew into a rage and slew the newborn god with the mighty sword Ame no Ohbari. He also used a sword and a spear. Odin, though. Now that one is interesting. Odin's most famous weapon is his spear Gungir. Interesting fact, the spear hero Motoyasu has a spear skill named Gungir in the story. Odin is not known to wield any other weapons. He's associated with the shield Svalin, but doesn't actually wield it in battle. Instead, he placed the shield as a barrier to protect the earth, Midgard, from the shining god, or the sun. He's not actually using it in battle. Similarly, though, he is associated with the sword Tyrfing. But Final Fantasy games most commonly associate Odin with this sword through the summon Zenditskan. In Norse mythology, Tyrfing was created by the dwarves, but was also cursed so that it would never rust, and would slay anyone it was drawn against, ultimately causing the end of its owner. The sword actually belonged to Odin's grandson, Svafurlami. He trapped the dwarves Dvalin and Durin until they agreed to forge him the sword, and in retaliation, the dwarves cursed it. So, while he may be associated with the sword in Final Fantasy lore, it's not true to Norse lore. When Odin is connected to weapons or armor outside of his iconic spear, it's always as a gift or a challenge to someone else, like when he plunged Sigmund's sword Gram into the tree in the middle of King Volsung's Great Hall. A sword that would later be inherited by Sigurd, our sword hero from earlier. Now, keeping with Norse mythology here, when I was thinking of bow heroes, I came across Skadi. Skadi is literally known as the bow-strung goddess, is associated with bows and arrows, archery, skiing, winter, and the mountains. Now, there is at least one passage that attests that she went to Asgard with all weapons of war. But the important thing here is that we never see her using anything but a bow. Cardinal heroes can carry other weapons, they just can't use them. And they can wear protective armor and equipment. So even if she was carrying all weapons of war, she may have intended them as an offering or gifts rather than her personal arsenal. There's some other honorable mentions. Robin Hood's signature weapon was an English longbow, especially crafted from yew wood. However, his arms also included an arming sword, a ballock dagger, and a wooden quarterstaff made of oak. While it doesn't hurt to be versatile, for a cardinal hero it's right out. Hui Yi is a legendary warrior from China who wielded a tiger bone bow that fired dragon tendon arrows. This ultra-heavy, massive divine bow was crafted from the bones of a defeated sacred tiger, Only Hu Yi, with his supernatural strength, possessed the ability to draw it. His arrows were crafted from the tendons of slain dragons. This gave the arrows a unique and terrifying property of being able to shoot all the way to the heavens. And we also see a special armor, the bow, that is made of monster parts, like the Cardinal Heroes. So his story goes that in ancient times, 10 rogue suns threatened to turn the earth to ash. So Hu Yi wielded his bow and shot 9 of them out of the sky, leaving only the one that we look up at now. He's also responsible for slaying the fierce 9-headed serpent Ji Ying with his bow, as well as other terrifying beasts. In this case, Hu Yi is a strong contender, but I'm sensing a theme here, so let's go with Skadi for now. So we have Sigurd for the sword hero, Odin for the spear hero, Skadi for the bow hero, but what about shield? Well, one Norse character comes to mind, and that's Ullr. Ullr is literally called the shield god. One myth attests that he even rode across the ocean while surfing on his shield. Like how King Arthur's shield Prydwen is also based on his boat. However, in combat, Ullr primarily used a bow and arrow. In fact, it was his signature weapon, and named after his home in Ydalar, a sacred grove of yew trees used exclusively for bow making. Yew wood really was the standard for bow making in those days. And honestly, to a point, still kind of is, unless you get those like carbon fiber bows or whatever the new modern technology is for that one. But this is why I feel that even in the universe of the Four Cardinal Heroes, the shield really is the odd one out, and the series canon reflects that. So it's not a perfect quad. Unless you wanted to cheat, or you could have a unique take that places Ullr with Svalin and makes him kind of the shield hero, but I'll do you one better. When we think of heroes in mythology and legends, we tend to think of things that are relatively old, and in some cases set the standard for many more of its kind to come along. I'm not going to pretend like my extremely Eurocentric list here is the birthplace of all myths or stories, though a lot of isekai, including Shield Hero, are extremely Eurocentric as well. But I am using this preamble to remind people that these are literary characters, even if we call them gods, heroes, legends, or myths. Someone made characters out of all of them, the same way we do things like anime heroes, book heroes, or even comic book heroes. So, submitted for your approval, I suggest our shield hero is none other than Captain America. In roughly 95% of all Captain America stories, his vibranium shield and his super soldier body are his only weapons. This fits the profile we expect from the shield hero in general. While some iterations very early in Captain America's comic book run did depict him in wartime conflict using military gear, such as firearms, it's noted that once he transitioned to a full-time superhero, he stopped using them. In fact, a very specific comic run in the 1980s, it was retconned into a strict rule that he never used guns. Although later adaptations have treated it as a willing surrender to not use them and opt for a more defensive posture behind the shield instead. Is it perfect? No, not really. But you're probably going to scream when you find out who is. The point here is that Captain America is the first hero to canonically use a shield in combat. There are older patriotic characters such as the Shield, but he didn't actually use a shield as much as he was a shield. And when you think about it, superheroes are like our modern day equivalent to literary heroes like Odin. Some of them even exist in the same universe. So you really could have a team of Odin, Skadi, Sigmund, and Steve all lined up with cardinal weapons stopping the cursed waves. Cap even fits the hero of the people trope. He would never let the demi-humans be used as slaves. That looks like fascism to him, and Steve is strictly anti-fascist. Remember, he turned against the United States government when they wanted to make a publicized registry of superpowered humans. Creators did this at the time because they wanted the symbol of the United States to be one of defense, not aggression. And it's a symbolism that has persisted even into modern era of comics, with Steve actively standing against border control agents. We might be able to do better. I have some other ideas that are spawned from that noble act of Cap. As in, these characters were all, know it or not, inspired to only use shields by this specific trope. Charlie Morningstar, Steven Universe, and Goofy Goof. We are looking at super modern concepts now, but this is the absolute bottom of my barrel. Given how recent these are, I can fly through them all super quick. So in the first season of Hazbin Hotel, during the finale, we see Charlie protecting Vaggie with a shield. But she's not using any weapons. Just this shield that is snake and apple themed with 6 wings. Remember those wings. But later in the same battle, her shield actually transforms, along with her demonic appearance, into a more devilish trident mimicking early tropes of devils and demons with pitchforks. So, 2 weapons, GTFO. Next, Steven Universe. Steven's shield used to belong to his mother, Rose Quartz. He inherited it along with all of her other armaments, such as the light cannons and Rose's sword. We could say that because Steven doesn't wield the cannons, they don't count. And he gives the sword to Connie Maheshwaran, sort of like how Naofumi does Raftalia, right? Right? The problem is, Steven still does and can use Rose's sword. We won't count his gem powers, as those are more of a physical manifestation of his strength and skill. But the shield and sword aren't magical conjurations. They're separate equipment made by Bismuth, a gem blacksmith. So, Steven's out too. Now, I already know what you're thinking with this one. No, there's no way. He's used things like guns and swords and whatever else in the past, right? I would actually argue that those were all dramatizations and not actually combat scenarios. A lot of old Disney was satirical or situational comedy. The only time we've seen Goofy Goof as a serious combatant was in the Kingdom Hearts series, in which it is shown as a support role that uses no other weapons, but does use his physical power to defend and attack for his friends. Now remember what I said about Charlie's shield? Look at Goofy's shield called Save the King. In every iteration of this shield across all 3 current Kingdom Hearts games where it's available is some combination of wings, in which they have the same number of wings, hearts, which could be akin to the apple or the snake, and it's called Save the King. Mother-in King of Hell? Gotta love the Easter egg. Well, there you go. I've dove as deep as I can, too deep possibly, to come up with this accursed ensemble. I hope you enjoyed it. Hit like and subscribe for more comparative mythology rants like this in the future. Thank you everyone for your continued support, and I look forward to giving you even more in the future. Our community keeps expanding with authentic viewers and subscribers that tune in every week excited for the next installment. Whether that's listening to my world-building rants or tuning in for a full episode, you're the ones that keep this channel afloat against the unforgiving algorithm that keeps trying to douse the flame. That's the meaning of many a mickle max a muckle. Many smaller things making a big thing. And now, a shout out to our patrons and channel members.
Plebe64 Potato,
Mr. Lobo King 8778,
P64P,
Regios001,
Jack Plays K Plays,
Maria Elsa 6363,
Moose Now,
El Dragon Biano 3742,
Jack McLeod,
Persephoroth,
Josh is Mary,
Runaway Train 2502,
EA Shadow Gamer,
Sigma LaFlare,
Crochet Whimsy 413,
Anubian the 1335,
Angels Art and Gaming,
Aisha Kashif,
Pluve 81,
Aegis Knight,
7 Star Sanctuary,
and Chained Furry,
T. Mitchell Carr,
MB Durg Wraith,
Emily Masternardi,
Heinrich 28,
Shadow Fox,
Arya Gamari,
Charles Tam,
Jace Moreland,
Pammy Poo,
and Lunder Lumen.